Hey guys, welcome back to the Dillon England Show. I'm your host, Dillon England, and on today's episode of the podcast, we have Andrew Netz, who's the proud owner of Netz Electric. But instead of talking about business, today we're talking about something a little bit, you could argue more fun. We're talking about conspiracy theories. Yeah, we're talking about conspiracy theories today. Some conspiracy theories that are so crazy, they might just be true. Andrew's done a lot more research than I have on this stuff. This was a really fun episode to put together. If you enjoyed the change up of content, please let me know in the comments. I appreciate you guys for watching. And also shout out our sponsor, Cool Beans Coffee Brewery. This is some of the best coffee in the world. It's a low acid coffee. So if you struggle with acid reflux or your stomach doesn't feel good after drinking coffee, this coffee is one that I know you're gonna love. So get yourself a bag. The link is in the description. But without further ado, let's jump into today's fun episode. Conspiracy theories that are so crazy, they might just be true. Thank you guys for watching this episode of the Dillon England Show. Enjoy the show. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina with my buddy Andrew. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We've been talking for a year. Andrew's a good friend from college. And then I think it all started, I posted one of my third or fourth podcasts. I posted an episode with Matt Davis called, Cholesterol's a Lie and Conspiracy Theories. And then I saw on Andrew had this cool thing on Instagram where he would just kind of give his thoughts and meanderings about things that a lot of people don't give thought on or think people are crazy for thinking. And then the more I dive deep in the hole itself, I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's more to this than people are saying. Anyways, we've just had a blast like the past year, just kind of like hanging out and talking and virtually hanging out. Yeah. Yes. And just kind of seeing his thing. And so I presented Andrew with the idea. I was like, bro, what if we just do like a, conspiracy theory podcast where we just talk about your favorite conspiracy theories? Yeah. And one thing I also want to mention, Andrew started a company.
I did.
So right at the beginning of the company,
Netz Electric. We're about 2 months in. I've been doing electrical work for about 6 years now, and just was at a great place, great company, but kind of felt like I hit a ceiling there, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate with. But yeah, it's been good. Mostly residential. Definitely took a leap without having all of my ducks in a row, but it's been really good. God's provided for sure. But yeah, it's been good.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's jump in. Pumped for your company, but I'm also pumped for this podcast.
Yeah.
And
good segue.
So was that pretty good?
That was good, yeah.
Smooth? All right. So a couple conspiracy theories that I want to get it just out there. Common, popular ones. And maybe people listening, this is new.
Yeah.
But moon landing.
So moon landing, there's like layers to it. So one conspiracy theory would be we had to win the space race. So for those of you that don't know, we were competing against Russia, USSR in the 60s, 50s, 70s, through the 90s. And pretty much every step of the way as far as space goes, Russia was beating us. So a way that we could beat the Russians, beat communism or whatever, was we're going to get to the moon first. JFK has a very famous speech where he's like, by the end of the decade, we'll have a man on the moon.
That was actually great.
So anyway, the one conspiracy theory would be NASA or the government hired Stanley Kubrick, director of The Shining and 2001: Space Odyssey, hired him to fake the moon landing just so we could beat Russia in the race. And then, years later, we actually did go back. But, for the sake of beating the Russians and patriotism and all that, we faked the moon landing for the content, pretty much. So that's like you can still be not canceled or whatever, or viewed as crazy because we still went to the moon.
That's the one I've heard. So there's more.
Well, the one would be we never went to the moon. So that's what I would probably fall more in line of. But yeah, so in my conspiracy theory content that I was doing on Instagram, naturally the moon landing was one of the things I talked about.
Classic.
And I was just curious, like they apparently had everything on the news at that time. Like they recorded everything, and then they had Walter Cronkite, who's like the famous voice of the 60s or whatever. He was like narrating everything, and then that's when they broadcasted Neil Armstrong, one small step for man. Apparently that was all live on TV. Apparently, allegedly. So I, with all the infinite time that I have, it's on YouTube or online.
Yeah, okay.
So I watched it, like however many hours of the space shuttle like traveling through space, approaching the moon, descending, like all of it. I definitely skipped ahead, but like you're going through like, all right, day 1, day 2, whatever. And it's animated like cartoons. So that's what was being broadcasted. You're trusting Walter Cronkite's voice as like the, most trustworthy man in America or whatever he was. This is kind of getting into the weeds of it, but you're watching a blip of like an animated thing traveling through space. And then it approaches the moon, and then it shows like an animated depiction of the shuttle or whatever, like descending to the moon landing. And then once it lands, then it cuts to the live feed of like Neil Armstrong like climbing out of the shuttle. And just it like, again, getting into the details, there's a lot of different things you could go with the moon landing, but just like common sense stuff. That's what I like to live.
Right.
As far as common sense conspiracy can live together. That means they had a camera mounted on the space shuttle the whole time, traveling through space, through turbulence, through whatever, landed, and then was able to record and broadcast Neil Armstrong climbing out of the shuttle. And like,
so they like live streamed it back then, is what they said?
Yeah. Wow. So it was like live broadcast. I mean, there was like a delay or whatever. Yeah. So like, just like stuff like that, I'm like, that doesn't really make any sense. So there's the Apollo 11s when we landed on the moon. They get there, they're there for like a couple of hours. And then they go back. I don't know if you've watched like the interviews of them after they came back. They're all just like frowning, upset. Like it's counterintuitive to like the depiction. Like I just freaking was on the moon, pumped. So then the other conspiracy theory is they did go to the moon, but they saw stuff there that they weren't allowed to talk about. So then they were like kind of like reclusive about it. So again, even the moon landing, there's like, you can agree that we never went. You can agree that we went, but then you can disagree on when we went, what we found, like all that kind of stuff. So there's layers to it. But
well, I think the follow-up question is also why we haven't been back.
Yeah. So there's a very famous interview. I don't know the guy's name, some NASA astronaut or scientist, and just saying, like answering that question, he's saying that we lost the technology. So we had the technology, but then we lost it, which
dang it,
doesn't make you. There goes our tax dollars.
Where did it go?
Like, I mean, obviously we weren't alive back then, but so then there's a conspiracy theory in that we destroyed the technology so that way no one else could go. But it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If someone could explain it to me from NASA, if you could have somebody on, a NASA astronaut who's been to space, been to the moon or whatever, then that would be great.
I'd love to ask Elon what he thinks about that, because he's so ingrained into SpaceX and knows what's
Mars
possible.
Or whatever.
He knows what's possible in space flight. I'd be, at least in some level, he'd be, because they're making reusable rockets, which is pretty sick.
Yeah.
I'd be curious on what he thinks. Yeah, the moon landing one for me is always interesting because, like, so growing up, I was like, there's no way. And actually, funny enough, I had a buddy.
No way that we went, or no way that was faked?
No way. Well, I just didn't even think that. I just assumed it was real. I never had any other thought. I had a buddy maybe 4 years ago, be like, oh yeah, the moon landing was faked. I'm like, bro, you're insane.
Yeah.
Like, stop with this tomfoolery. And then it's just like, okay, I'm still leaning towards we probably went, but
there's
a thread of doubt back there, because it makes too much sense for me that we needed a boost in the space race with Russia. And the fact that this is also an interesting, maybe I've talked about this. Also, like Neil Armstrong and them, they hate Elon Musk. They hate him. And
that would be Buzz Aldrin, because Neil Armstrong.
There you go, Buzz. Yeah. Buzz on them. But like the space people, like the astronauts, that they should be pumped.
Yeah.
That and there's an interview. There's an interview of Elon, a 60-minute interview, and they asked him. They say, like, Elon, like, well, how's it feel? Like, do you get support? He's like, no, like they don't, and it kills me because these are my idols. Like I grew up, these people, and so there's the conspiracy theory is that they're hiding something. Yeah. And they think that Elon will get closer to whatever that is, and so they're trying
man
to
of the people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just, I don't know if there's any legitimacy to that.
Yeah, it could be like these guys spent their careers, like most of them were like in the Air Force or something. Mm-hmm. And then they're like doctors or scientists or something. And they had to go through this process of being eligible to go to space. And then you have Elon, who definitely inherited a bunch of money, regardless of what he says. Like his parents owned like an emerald mine or something in Africa. And he's done things like great things with it and whatever, but he maybe from their perspective, he kind of skipped, like because he had money, he could just do that. But
and he's kind of smart.
Not to give them any credit because,
why do that?
But,
yeah. So the moon landing is one that I feel like I feel like the moon landing and the Titanic are two of the more like, I can see it.
Yeah. And Titanic's interesting. And now there's something else on the moon I want to talk about, but Titanic's interesting because it's like, it definitely happened. People died. The motivation is the interesting thing. Like why, if it was orchestrated, what would be someone's motivation?
So walk us through the Titanic. So I'd love to get like a story of each conspiracy theory. Give us the background.
What we were talking about before recording is there's like a history, there's a background. Like it's not just like the Titanic sank.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theory would be,
and you can give us the history. I want you to feel the freedom to dive in.
I will, for sure. So like in the 19 teens, like 12, 13, whatever, powerful people, wealthy people were getting ready to start the Federal Reserve, world banking, all that stuff. JP Morgan, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, like those type of people, which I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Vaguely.
Okay.
Yes.
So they were creating that, the Federal Reserve. Majority of the wealthy people, elites, whatever, were in favor of it. There were maybe 4 or 5 people who were very against it. And they were actually more wealthy than those other guys. They were all on the Titanic when it sank. JP Morgan was on the Titanic. He had a ticket, canceled. He gets off. Yes, it's time to drink the water. So he was going to go on the Titanic, the great unsinkable ship or whatever they called it. And you have these 3 or 4 other like super wealthy guys. JP Morgan owned the ship. He gets off, or owned like the line that the ship was, whatever. Fact checkers will cancel me on that.
Yeah, that's okay.
But yeah, so then these guys that opposed the Federal Reserve were on the Titanic. It sinks, they die, obviously. Horrible. It gets passed into law. Woodrow Wilson, I think, presented it to Congress. It happened over like their Christmas break, so there was like not everybody was there as far as Congress goes. It gets passed, and then the Federal Reserve, which would be kind of like the, I don't know, overarching, that's kind of like the first instance when the United States kind of made its shift towards corporate, deep state, from my perspective. So that's kind of like the first domino to fall, was getting rid of these people on the Titanic, and then they could kind of take over the United States. So
wow. So basically, the theory is that JP Morgan just like killed his competition.
Yeah, essentially. And when you label something as like the great unsinkable ship and like all this stuff, like he probably lost a bunch of money from that, but then you go into like what he was able to gain, the control, the power, influence, all that stuff. So in his mind, it was worth it. But that was, they had that meeting at Jekyll Island, which is a pretty notorious location. I think it's off the coast of Georgia or South Carolina or something. But even that location, Jekyll Island, has a history of like paganism. Like when the settlers came over, like Jekyll Island was kind of like this haunted place. Really? So it's interesting that those people chose that location as like, we're going to take over the United States. This kind of gets into the...
hey, I'm following you. I'm following you. Yeah, so you just keep leading us.
With the conspiracy theory, there's like, usually there's some sort of human sacrifice that's involved.
Wow.
And this kind of gets into the weeds of it a little bit. And I don't want to derail. In conspiracy theory, there's like a line between like evil, but like, obvious control, money, whatever, as the influence. But then there's like the other side of it that's like pure evil, like, that it's, you kind of have to walk that line mentally. Like once you go into that headspace of like, everything is evil, everyone who's on TV has sold their soul. Like you can quickly kind of lose grip on reality. So content will kind of come in and then I'll entertain it or not, but I try to live, rationally and not paranoid.
And that's a good quick segue point, because you got me very interested on what we were just talking about. But I do think that, the beautiful thing is that we believe God's in control.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But what we're trying to do and what Andrew's done is he says, well, let's just look a little deeper than what we're taught in history books. Let's just look a little. Let's just what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so tell me. Okay. So
Titanic
let's continue.
Okay.
Well, let's continue. So they meet on this Jekyll Island.
Yeah, they meet at Jekyll Island.
And you say there's a chance they're doing human sacrifices.
Not
on Jekyll Island.
Well, maybe, but I don't think it was happening like at Jekyll Island. And it wasn't. J.P. Morgan wasn't physically there. He had like a representative because these people don't want to be. If you had all of these people in one location, that could be, a sketchy thing. But so they decided we're going to orchestrate the Federal Reserve, and by that we'll influence, control the most powerful, an ascending nation, because this is 1912, 13, whatever. So this is before or during the beginning of World War I. World War II hasn't happened yet, which is when the U.S. kind of made that step to a global power, But yeah, so Jekyll Island, Federal Reserve, all of that, Titanic. And the interesting thing about the Titanic was there was a book that came out a few, maybe 10 years before the Titanic. The ship was called the Titan. It was called the Great Unsinkable. There's all these similarities between this book that was written
before
like 1899 or something.
Weird.
And then the Titanic is 1912. So 10, 13 years later. And then the amount of deaths, the running into an iceberg, all these things that match up. That's really hard you can't just be like, oh, okay, yeah, that was an accident. So either time travel's real, which is a separate conspiracy theory, or it was orchestrated. And something else with conspiracy theories, not to derail the Titanic conversation, but there's usually some form of desensitization or stuff that we'll watch in movies today is either desensitizing us or making us comfortable with certain agendas or things that the elites or whomever might be pushing us towards. So, they didn't have movies and stuff back then. Obviously they had movers or whatever they called them. But so books would be that version back then to release to the public to get people kind of used to that mindset or something happening. And then when it happens, it's almost as if they were expecting it to happen. A subtle form of not mind control, but getting people comfortable with something horrible to happen. So,
wow. Do you feel that? I mean, I just feel like for that to work, there has to be so many people on the same page for it to be able to function. And I look at our government, and I'm like, they're retarded. There's no. I look at our government and I'm like, there's no version where
they're all
Kamala
lined up on
Harris
the same,
and Biden and even Trump and whoever you want to,
right.
on whatever side of the aisle you think that they're we are so AOC is smart enough.
Well, she's not smart enough to do anything besides get elected, however that happened.
So then the question would be, if we're talking about the estate or the deep estate, and we're talking about it can't be government officials,
right?
Because Nancy Pelosi, and her brain's the size of my pinky. It just doesn't. It's not.
Yeah.
So who are these? And
it's the same. So bankers, Federal Reserve, whomever. I would say you copy and paste. You have these super rich people influencing. They didn't just give this hey, Woodrow Wilson, who was the president at the time, we really like this document. You should look at it and present it to Congress. It was, hey, Woodrow Wilson will, money or power, we'll get you reelected for your next term or whatever. So I think it's that same mentality or same type of conversation happening now, but because of how phones are everywhere, everybody has an opinion, so they might have to be a little more subtle today than they were back then. But
you think it's BlackRock?
BlackRock for sure. I mean, as far as I know, I'm just reading stuff online and then making opinions. But I would say BlackRock, George Soros. But I always say my opinion would be the Democratic and Republican parties are two wings of the same bird. So they both have their, agendas, but ultimately they're either controlled by the same brain or agenda or whatever. So if you have politicians, not all of them, but let's say the majority of them, they get put into office, but then whoever paid for all of their, advertisements or whoever, the super PACs or the, what do you call it? Who do you call the people?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The people like
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, whomever they are, which is, like the cliche thing for a conspiracy theorist to say. Dang, that's going to bother me. But the people that like fund them.
We're going to end recording.
Yeah. But they're telling them, my opinion, they're telling them like, all right, so this is going to come out and you're going to vote this way. Or like this is going to get presented to Congress to pass this, whatever, and you're going to vote this way on this docket. So it's not necessarily, Ted Cruz or whatever is like this evil mastermind, but he's being influenced by somebody who's telling him like, you need to make a really strong point against this, whatever it is. So it's really those people in the background, like actually like the deep state or the swamp that, Trump was famously fighting against. I would say that's more so the brains behind everything.
Do you think that's why he's gotten the hate he's gotten? So I think a lot of people think the deep state is a bunch of malarkey and bull crap.
Right.
And I think a lot of people believe that we still have, freedom of thought, and, you have the Democratic Party, the Republicans, that they are fighting for your respective parties. And
the illusion of choice is what I would say.
And so do you think that the reason why so let's just play we'll play the game. I'll keep going down this with you. So if the deep state is real, right? And I know you say it is real, but okay, if it is real in this conversation, and Trump, you would think, would be involved with those people, with how rich and popular he was before the presidency.
Yeah.
So you would think that when Trump says drain the swamp, he knows who he means and they know who he means, because he was running with that same crowd.
Or at least aware of who they were.
Yeah. And so, because he's freaking Trump.
Yeah.
Like, the dude knew who's been to Epstein Island. The dude knew.
Well, he's flown on the plane, apparently.
Right, apparently. But so
Sorry,
I wonder,
Trumpers out there, but
so I wonder, Joe, though, if that's why it was such this visceral, especially
what's he going to say? Who's he going to,
if that was why he's been attacked so much, he has been.
Trump's interesting to me. Like 2016, when he was running against Hillary, I was like very much like, oh yeah, Trump's the man. Like, love Trump. I did not like Hillary for a lot of different reasons, but that was before I kind of got into the whole conspiracy theory thing. So I wasn't really aware of like, like the Pizzagate stuff that came out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but so I wasn't really thinking of it in that way. It was more so the purely political Republican versus Democrat. Yeah. Trump's rough around the edges, but he says what he thinks. He's rich, so he's not bought by some, conglomerate that's controlling his every move. So I don't know. It's tough for me because part of me is like, I would really like for Trump to win this next election, obviously, because Joe Biden or Newsom or whomever is going to be horrible, in my opinion. But then there's stuff that Trump did while in office that's a little questionable. And then also, so this kind of gets into the vaccines thing, but he was a big advocate of the COVID vaccines.
Sure.
Not necessarily
it was called the Trump shot for a while.
Yeah, and not necessarily like the mandates and everything.
Which is
like
funny.
that.
Which, by the way, which is really funny about that, because the left is saying how much, like, how awful Trump is, that he created the vaccine. He got the vaccine.
Yeah.
He was the one saying you should get the vaccine.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're like, oh, he never wanted. He created it, which I know is a problem for people, because I'm like,
Yeah.
But he was the one who did it.
And that to me,
he appointed Fauci. Let's not forget that.
Well, Fauci's been
as overseer of that COVID thing.
Yeah,
that was Trump.
Yeah, you're right.
That did that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just think it's funny how, while you might say Trump makes mistakes, Trump did play to the more moderate players.
Yeah.
And they're still mad at him, which to me, it still makes me like, and we'll pivot from politics in a second, but I I don't know anything about conspiracy theories and Trump and all that kind of stuff. I have no clue. So you can enlighten me. I'd be interested to know.
Yeah.
I still believe Trump can't be bought. I still believe Trump loves this country because there is no version where you're going to lose billions through fines of Mar-a-Lago, where you're going to want to go to jail, or you're going to be potentially put in jail. Like, I don't see, you can say that he had business dealings, whatever, but like he's lost tons
For sure.
because of this.
Yeah.
And then yesterday just got shot at and hit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, unless his ego is just so massive that he's willing to go through insane pain and loss,
Yeah.
the only other conclusion you come with is like he just loves this country and wants to make it better. I guess that's still where I land. And he made mistakes, but I'm like, bro, I still think, again, and maybe you can enlighten me on some conspiracy things that I'm not aware of with Trump.
Right. And it's not necessarily enlightened. Most of the stuff that I have opinions on or whatever is, I try to do due diligence before I have like an opinion on something, but there's like, you'll watch a video or read an article or whatever, and then you kind of like let that ruminate in your mind. You kind of digest the information that you just watched, read, whatever. And then you look and you see all the different things on media, social media or whatever. And you can form your opinion based off of those after you've, let it sit for a little bit. So I wouldn't say that, everything Trump's done is horrible. I genuinely hope if our choice is the Democratic nominee or Trump, I would rather Trump win. And I'm not anti-Trump or anything. But I guess back to the vaccine thing is the two wings of the same bird. If you have Trump saying, I made this if like the agenda is mass vaccinations, if that's the agenda, mandatory vaccines. If you have Trump, who's like the champion of the people, silent majority, all the rednecks out there, everybody, whatever.
That don't trust the government.
Yeah, that don't trust the government. And then you have Trump, who's like the champion of the people saying, I made this vaccine, it's great, take this vaccine and then we'll get back to normal, you can work your job or whatever. That's going to cast a very broad net for, people as far as getting vaccinated. That would be the conspiracy.
So when he did that, the whole like he's not bought and paid for and all that that started to give you doubts.
Yes. So I'm like we had talked about earlier. I would say I'm more in line with Bobby Kennedy as far as the vaccines go. Not like anti-vaccines, but choice as far as like. Yeah. There's people that lost their jobs because they didn't get vaccinated.
Yeah, dude, it's well documented, and I don't care who you are listening to this podcast. You can think vaccines are great. You could think they're terrible. That's not really what we're talking about now. That's a separate conversation. What we're saying is mandating you and destroying your life if you don't. Yeah. And there's actually something to be talked about, which is legitimate, which is something called herd immunity. What I mean is legitimate, like we don't have the bubonic plague here anymore. We don't have we don't have certain diseases that were prevalent and that you can argue it's because of vaccines.
Yeah.
Because of herd immunity, everyone got X vaccine. So whooping cough, every kid isn't going to die from whooping cough this year because it's whatever. The point is that the flip side of it, because I have doctor friends are going to be like, it's important for certain like sicknesses that have been tested over time. That's what they would say. I know tested over time.
Thank you.
That's important.
Yeah.
And so whether you're anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine, you can be like, okay, I can kind of get the logic. Where I would also agree with you is an experimental vaccine that's brand new, where it was weird to me, was they weren't admitting it was new. So they were just saying this is safe. And
safe and effective.
Where it lost me was if they would have just been honest, and if they would have just said, hey, listen, we have this vaccine. It's new. We think it will help, but we don't know the long-term side effects. We're going to give you a choice. Mm-hmm. You can take your risk with a vaccine. You can take your risk with COVID. Both have potential bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Like COVID did kill people. That's a fact. It did kill people.
Yep.
I know people that died of it. So it's not, I vehemently get frustrated with people that are like, COVID was a sham in the sense of like, it just didn't exist.
It was all fake.
Yeah. Like pneumonia kills people, right? So like it was a disease that killed people. That's a fact. It's documented. But to force people to get some made up quickly figure it out thing. That is it is a weird thing.
When they're motivating people with free Krispy Kreme donuts or whatever, like get your vaccine and then you can get donuts.
Shows you how fat Americans are.
Dude, right? Get your vaccine and here's a Burger King. Dude, like
only
fries.
in America would it be like destroy your life and you get a donut.
Yeah,
you know, like
so that even 80% like that
increase of heart attack.
Yeah,
and you get a donut.
And I know there's when I was on Instagram and stuff, there's like all these montages of people like just passing out randomly, and the conspiracy theory would be that that's not common before the vaccines, and then since vaccines, like there's been an increase in that type of behavior. So,
yeah, I mean, dude, you could argue since the COVID vaccines came out, just heart attacks and heart health, and I know YouTube's probably going to be like, this is getting demonetized. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. But like,
you can edit this out.
Yeah, no, I won't. This is good stuff. No, but like, dude, you have football players just keeling over in the middle of the field. Yeah. That's just not normal. And it has happened before.
Right.
Like even
stroke related, but not.
But even like Pistol Pete was a basketball player. He like died at the age of like 40 in his 40s, early 50s in basketball. So it has happened. Cardiac arrest has happened.
He had a hole in his heart, I'm pretty sure.
There was something there. Yeah. But I'm just saying like it has been, people have just keeled over, but to the rate of like Olympians doing it, like it's been a weird thing.
Trend. Mm-hmm. And they're like the elite physically, like so
you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and they are monitored constantly. So if they had a irregular heartbeat or a whatever, it should have been.
Yeah, like Bronny James had cardiac arrest, and it was one of those things, dude. It's kind of sad, but like, because the kid had a heart attack.
Yeah, like
but then everyone on Twitter was like, "Where's the vaccine?"
Yeah, and
I'm like, come on, like give it some time.
Like it's easy. Go ahead.
But I'm saying, but in the back of your mind, you're like,
yeah.
Are they wrong though?
It's easy for me, like on this couch, being like, it was probably because he got vaccinated.
Yeah.
And same, like back to the Trump getting shot thing. Like we make a big deal about whether it was real or not. Like someone died.
Yeah.
Like the shooter and the person that got shot.
Bro, there's like, no chance it's not real. Yeah. I will die on this hill.
So like, well, regardless, it's easy for conspiracy theories and
anybody
or tragedies to make like downplay it to fit your agenda or to fit your point of view, your perspective. Immediately it's like, oh, well, this was faked or this was because of this reason. It's like, well, whether it happened for whatever reason, there are still real world consequences.
There's still repercussions as a result.
So as far as the conspiracy theory mindset, like that's something that I have to kind of remind myself, not to change the subject.
No, it's great.
But there's definitely a lens of like, okay, I'm taking in this information and this is my personal kind of worldview. I'm taking in the information that is being given to me, whether that's social media, news, people talking to me, and kind of filter it through my worldview as far as like religion, Christianity, but then also this is being told to me for a certain reason. Someone's going to have an agenda. They're going to use this real world event to fit their agenda or push a, vaccine or whatever it is. So I don't want to be so quickly influenced by whatever happened to, affect my mentality as far as like, hating people or upset about something or like, so it's, what I say is like, if something happens and you're just like, January 6th going to the White House and like trying to say the election's rigged, you're probably a little too far on the one side. And then if you're like the first one to get vaccinated because, you want to help your neighbor, you're probably a little too far that way too. So you kind of want to sit in the middle as far as taking in information, living your life, because 95% of the people you interact with are just like you.
Yeah.
And you can view conspiracy theories like I do as kind of like entertainment, not necessarily like affecting my worldview to where I like or dislike a certain group of people.
Yeah, I think you do have to be careful because you can very easy just go crazy.
Yeah.
Like I know of someone that's just literally just gone crazy, like legitimately crazy because, and I don't mean crazy because of beliefs. Like, I mean, like they are just
paranoia.
Yeah. They're freaking out about everything. And so they don't run electricity to their house anymore because they think
frequency.
Yeah. Frequencies. Then Wi-Fi's going to give you cancer or whatever. Like, so like, it's just you gotta be careful of when we talk about these things. And I think it's a really healthy way to look at it. If you believe that at the end of the day, God's in control, you have freedom to explore without going completely crazy. And I do think, and one of the things I appreciate about, so when we say conspiracy, this is one thing that I know I just jumped, but this is a point. Because when we talk about conspiracy theories, it's such a negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
and you started to talk about it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the reason why I was saying is like when you believe God's in control, you're allowed to explore into conspiracy theories when in reality it's just trying to get to the basis of truth. I think real conspiracy theorists are people that just want to find truth and don't trust just the surface level of information.
Yeah, truth doesn't need to be defended in the sense of like information being hidden.
Right.
So that's why people might label me conspiracy theorist, and most of the people that I've like talked to, like friends or whatever, you know, they're not like viewing me as crazy. They're kind of like might laugh at some things that I'll entertain to think about. But, you know, if something is true, it shouldn't be afraid of being vetted or looked into or, you know, gotten to the bottom of. And there's only so much you can do through a phone or laptop to do that type of digging unless you like physically go and like, and I'm not doing, you know, I'm not going to January 6th. I'm not going all the way over there. But, so yeah, the truth doesn't need to be defended in the sense of like information being hidden or, you know, I'm not afraid of what I'm going to find if I were to look into something. So,
yeah. So you said the conspiracy theory buzzword came as far as a negative connotation to that came as an effect or as a reason or of a aftermath of JFK's assassination.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yep.
There are people that will vehemently be like, he was just some crazy whatever. So walk me through why did they turn that word into a bad thing? And then what was that? Yeah, what's that whole scenario?
So conspiracy theory, not that they were trying to create a label, I would say, but for that instance, like they weren't creating a label that anytime anyone disagrees with us, we can label them a conspiracy theory. My opinion would be after the JFK assassination, there was enough people that were questioning the narrative, even accusing members of the government of being involved to where they needed to get control of the situation. And everyone just being labeled a conspiracy theory quickly quieted people from not wanting to be viewed as crazy. Because at the time it was very much like, you know, the Red Scare, communist. So if you disagree with what the government's saying, you're a communist. And then you have, you know, neighbors are going to ostracize you, family members are going to like cancel you or whatever. So it was a quick and easy way to quiet people up. You don't want to be viewed a conspiracy theorist or communist. Or
so
whatever.
what are the opinions of the JFK?
So the main narrative is JFK driving down Dallas, I think. Lee Harvey Oswald was a communist sympathizer who was a lone gunman, acted alone, got a job at the school book depository, knowing that or I don't know if he was knowing, but knowing that JFK was going to be in that area a few months before, and then had a gun there, shot, I think 4 shots, and then ran away, and then he was captured and then shot.
That's the normal story.
That's the normal narrative.
Okay.
But did you know, which I didn't know this until recently, the latest government-funded investigation into the JFK assassination says that there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll. The House Committee into investigating assassinations or something, which was founded in 1976, which was started to directly look into the JFK assassination. Because still, you know, 13 years later, there are still people questioning what was going on.
Right.
So the official conclusion didn't say that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't involved, but they said that there was most likely a second shooter because of firsthand accounts, witnesses who were, you know, heard certain things over in that area, or the direction that
this is a government funded.
This is a government like official conclusion. So it's not like some harebrained reporter that was there and came to that conclusion. So just to add that little asterisk in there. But all you hear about is Lee Harvey Oswald. So the motivation behind it does kind of go back a little bit of a history lesson. Allen Dulles, who was one of the founders of the CIA, who was a Nazi sympathizer during World War II. He was, you know, obviously very involved with the CIA. JFK was pretty against the CIA. He got Allen Dulles removed as the head of the CIA during his presidency. There were a lot of things going on during that time. There was the Cuban Missile Crisis. beginning of Vietnam, all this stuff. And JFK was very much a let's try to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, like, I obviously wasn't alive back then, so I didn't know all the mentality, but there were still people that were riding the wave of we won World War II, we're the best, we're the greatest country. And then you have the military industrial complex, which Eisenhower talks about on his farewell speech as president, pretty much letting JFK know, like, hey, there's people who just want to resolve every solution by using our military force. So JFK was trying to avoid that as much as possible. They had the Operation Mongoose, which was we were going to fund Cuban rebels in Cuba. CIA would help them with airstrike or whatever, air support. And then it's called the Bay of Pigs. I'm sure you've heard about that, like in history class or whatever. But notoriously, JFK backed out of that because he didn't want, American blood on his hands. Got a lot of pushback, blowback from military, but also like United States people.
Right.
So there's that. There was the Vietnam, the Bay of something. I'm horrible at like the details and stuff, but there was the Vietnam beginning stages of the Vietnam where he had Marines stationed there. French had been overseeing or in control of Vietnam. They had the Viet Cong pushback, whatever. U.S. goes over to help. Again, there was some scuffs, military incidences. So JFK was like, I don't want U.S. people dying on my hands. So he removed some people. So he had all these things where he was kind of overstepping what the military leaders were saying he should do, like the Pentagon or whatever. So you have all that kind of going on. He kicks out the CIA director because he wants to disband the CIA.
Right.
He famously said he wants to destroy the CIA into a million pieces. Like he thought it was an infestation. Kind of the beginning of like the deep state, like the big person against
Turns
that.
out he might be right.
Yeah, turns out he might be right. Yeah. So you have all these type of things going on. There's actually an executive order that he had introduced, which would also disband the Federal Reserve, so which we had talked about earlier. So he has all these little things that he's doing that are pushing back against what...
Poking the bears.
Poking the deep state, whether it's the military, banking, CIA, whatever. So that would be like the motivation behind why someone would want him assassinated. Whether that was Oswald, who was a lone gunman but was actually funded by the CIA, or it was, there's a theory that it was Cubans who were upset about him backing out of the Bay of Pigs. They didn't let us take our country back, so we're going to...
Did you see the video I saw on the Rogan show where it looks like the person in front of Kennedy turns around?
The Zapruder film or something?
Shoots him from inside the car.
Yep. That's a really famous theory because he gets the first shot, which could have been from Oswald, he gets shot from behind and he kind of slumps forward. And then the governor of Texas was in front of him, so the shot went through his upper shoulder, JFK's shoulder, and then actually hit the governor in front of him.
Yeah. So
he kind of leans forward, he leans over, and Jackie, his wife, leans over to him, and he's like, I guess he says, like, I've been shot, or whatever you would say if you got shot.
Yeah.
Ow. Yeah. So, like, that happens, he's leaning forward, and then you see him, like, blow back that way. Mm-hmm. Which, if that's all coming from Oswald, who's
behind
at his 5 o'clock or whatever, that doesn't make sense, like, just physics.
Right.
So then the Zapruder film, I think is what it's called. It's the very famous, like, panorama of the car, like JFK's car going, and it's like filming over. It's very choppy at that instant of the car when he does blow back like that. So with some editing, whether that's to make it look, more like an assassination from a Secret Service or whatever, you can see someone kind of turn around and reenact it. So there's that theory. There's another theory that somebody was at the grassy knoll. I've listened to a pretty good podcast. It's pretty much just focused on the JFK assassination. And there were a whole bunch of lookalikes. So there was a Lee Harvey Oswald double. Like Oswald went out the front. Somebody saw him exactly what he was wearing with like a package or something the size of a rifle going out the back. Like all that type of stuff. There was somebody who was wearing a trench coat who was at the overpass that the cars drove under. Like there were two of those guys dressed the same way. So like just weird stuff to where it's, at the time, you have all these reports coming out, like in the 63, whenever he died, November 22nd, 1963. You have all this reporting coming out like, hey, there's some question marks here. Let's take a deeper look. And it was immediately like, no, we got him. It was Lee Harvey Oswald, who was shot like right after he was arrested. So he couldn't have been able to be questioned or like interrogated.
Of course.
Yeah. And he was like staunchly like, I don't know what happened. I didn't do whatever they're saying I did. Like that was his attitude the whole time. It wasn't like, frick JFK, using other words, screw him.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. It was, I didn't do this. I don't know what's happening.
Right.
Why are they doing this to me? He gets shot on film, so everyone saw that he was killed. So like, again, that was a very, I guess, detailed or specific.
No,
but,
that's what I want.
so that's the story behind it. And then you have Bobby Kennedy, who is JFK's younger brother, who was his attorney general, I believe, who the whole time was pretty much like, they killed my brother. It wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. It was whoever, the deep state or whomever. He runs in 1968, I believe, and he gets assassinated, Sirhan. And I think he had just won the California primary for the Democratic Party. So he was leading towards most likely going to win the presidency. He gets assassinated. That's around the same time that Martin Luther King Jr. got assassinated. So a lot of people, now that's maybe some different motivations behind it, but, MLK's wife or kids believe that it was the FBI that killed him. So it's like not out of the realm of possibility that our government would be behind an assassination.
Right.
And just to keep that thread going, Gerald Ford had to put in an executive order to say that, hey, secret intelligence, we need to stop killing people in other countries like he had to officially say, you can no longer assassinate people.
Wow.
So whether it's happening overseas or in our own country. So
yeah, Hillary Clinton didn't listen to that.
Yeah. Who Gerald Ford is the only unelected president, which is pretty interesting to go into that. And he was on the Warren Commission, who was in charge of investigating the JFK assassination. There's a lot of things that, like, once you kind of get into it, it's like, I don't know if you've seen that.
Stop. Yeah, it's like a piece of yarn you're just pulling.
The meme, Charlie Day, where like
Yeah.
he's got the meme, he's like, like everything's connected. That's why you kind of have to, like, when you're in that men's mind space, you kind of have to like step back, like, all right, this was like 40 years ago. I'm not going to get assassinated, whatever.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of mess with yourself a little bit, but yeah, like there's so many overlapping of conspiracy theories that kind of tie together.
Because the JFK thing hasn't ever died out. Like it's not been one of those things where it's just like, this conspiracy theory blip kind of came up, was disproven.
Yeah.
It's actually been one that's kind of gained more steam.
As they release. Yeah.
The more people have looked into it, the more they've released, the more people have seen. And that's what's scary is the more they've released.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary. I mean, when we talk about the JFK thing, I think about the Trump thing, the shooter was on a roof 150 yards away. That is obviously you check that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why the conspiracy theory kind of goes in there. Like, not to interrupt you, but like that's an obvious location that should have been canvassed. Right. And apparently there was reporting that citizens saw.
Yeah, no. It's not reporting. You have the video.
Yeah. You
have videos, and it's like a 30-second or 40. They're side by side of how long they had to.
Like, hey, we know that guy's there. Yeah,
so there's
Let's do something about it.
So there are going to be people that be like, no, this is just some guy acting. I told my cousin yesterday, and people are going to call me crazy. It's fine. But I'm like,
welcome to the club.
Thank you. But I'm like, there is no version that this, like, there are either two things true, in my opinion, on the Trump thing. Like, I don't even believe it's staged at all. And this is why I don't believe it's staged. Because I heard that. I was like, the dude shot at his face. Like, if you're going to stage something, you're going to shoot at like a dude's like calf muscle. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not going to shoot a guy's face.
Yeah.
My opinion.
You have to be very.
You have to like do.
No, you're not going to kill him.
You can't do it. But that far away, you can't do that. Like, not the best. I mean, that's just like that's a 1 in a million shot to be able to do that. So I'm like, that to me, just right there. If he was hitting like the hand or the something, I'm like, okay, I could see you left wing conspiracy theorists trying to spin this.
Now they have their own.
So,
spectrum.
But now I'm like, there's two things that are true. Either the security detail, whatever you call them,
Service.
His Secret Service that are assigned to former presidents or whatever. So the Secret Service were inept because the leader or the person in charge of the Secret Service, who used to work for like Cheetos or something like that.
I didn't know this because I haven't been on social media. So
okay, so
tell
I'll
me
give you
for
some
the first time. Yeah.
So who was like the security whatever for like Cheetos or some chip brand or something. One of her main goals for yes, yeah. I was just kidding. No, it gets deeper.
Just kidding.
No, not just kidding. Not just kidding. This is why. One of her main goals for 2024 was to get more women in Secret Service. Let's keep going that. So not only do we have more women in Secret Service, we have women that can't even holster a gun. There's a video of a Secret Service agent when they're getting Trump in the car. She's trying to holster her gun, and she's so frazzled, she can't even holster her own gun. There's a picture of a Secret Service woman, dude, hiding beneath Trump. She's hiding behind Trump.
Like protecting herself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the dudes and another chick are like trying to keep Trump down when he's like, fight,
Yeah, that iconic picture.
Just and then she's
Which
like,
part of me was like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, all part of me is like,
I know,
let's go.
but my mentality.
And so with the chick there's a chick, a Secret Service girl going like, oh my gosh, I'm being shot.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, either they're inept, stupid hires that they had no business being in Secret Service. So I guess there's three. Second would be they intentionally chose the inept of the inept to be in Trump's
whoever
detail.
they are.
Yes. Yeah. Whoever designed that, they're like, they have zero.
Something will happen at some point.
And it was just like, they checked the roof and they're like, yeah, it's clear. And then they just don't go back and station someone, whatever. Or third, it was just an intentional oversight that whoever was in charge of that area knew about it.
Let it happen.
The local police said, like, because there were people saying, hey, there's something going on there. Yeah. And the local police were like, no, they did nothing.
Yeah.
And so then it was just intentional oversight. Like the actual security team is compromised.
Yeah.
So like, to me, those are the only scenarios because it's too close to be staged.
Yeah.
Like it just can't happen. So you're either looking at ineptness, stupidity, or it's intentional.
Yep.
And all three of those things are terrifying because you want Secret Service to be the best of the best. Like you assume the Secret Service is like, they are like,
upper echelon.
You don't mess with those dudes and they're sharp. And you have like, I have a buddy who's a cop and I'm going to call him later today. But you have people that are like, they're former snipers. They're making videos on social media being like, this is like step 101 of like,
canvas the
high ground.
Yeah.
You look at it. And so it's just weird. To my point, the reason I went into that and so there you go. There's some updates for you. You can mull those over later.
I'll have an opinion in about 2 days. Probably.
I got you. Yeah, you can text me. But the reason I mentioned that is with the JFK thing, it's only just kept going in steam.
For sure.
And as they release things, and this was, I guess, my point, they killed the dude that shot Trump. Okay, and shot the other people, which a man and his family died, and I saw a post from his daughter.
Yep.
So they killed the dude. Right out, like boom. And I understand it. But
cover up the tracks.
It's like, when did they kill him? Was he actively shooting? Was he done? Was he running away? Was he, because like, we don't know. Mm-hmm. Like those are, he's still on the building. They killed him when he was on the building. You can see the picture. So he was still on the building.
Of him dead or
of him dead.
Of him being shot?
Of him dead.
Okay.
But he was not in the same position he was shooting. And so there's just a lot of questions. And then this is where it gets even deeper. You're going to love this. Today, the government came out and said that we can't crack his phone. That he acted, but we think he acted alone. He's also a registered Republican, interestingly enough, but he gave money to the Democratic Party like 8 years ago. So this is what's weird.
Red herring.
They can crack the phones of the people of the January 6th thing. And they can find out everything about these people, where they work. And they're imprisoning people 2 years after it happened. And they're still going after people. There's a whole team of people going after the January 6th people. They can figure out everything. But this one dude,
impregnable.
We don't know why he did this. This is so random. We can't even get to his phone.
It's like Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah.
Same security team.
It's the same,
same IT.
So it's just, so people, and the reason I bring all this up is I want to give you an update on that.
Thank you.
You can
I
think through that.
It.
But it's not crazy to just think through, okay, like this is at least weird.
Yeah.
And what's weird is when you're just hoping they release more information, because it's easy to put together a narrative when you don't have all the facts. Like with JFK, you're like, they're, oh, actually, there's a second shooter. Oops.
Yeah.
30 years later.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this would have been nice to know when we were building the narrative 30 years ago. And so that's what makes me nervous about when like this guy with Trump, dude's dead. Okay, like.
Yeah. Was that the only course of action? Was just to shoot him right away?
So it's just an interesting thing when it comes to trusting the government. When it comes to that, that's where I do think a healthy dose of reality to people that have just been blindly being like, they want the best for us. And I'm like, well,
that's probably been like the biggest, as far as like how getting into conspiracy theories have changed me at all. Yeah. It's just not blindly trusting what anyone says, whether that's like a actor that I like or a person on my favorite sports team. Go Birds. So like
I'll edit that out.
Yeah. It's just easy to like blindly say, oh, like, well, Trump said this, or Trey Gowdy or whomever you know, said this. I really like Trey Gowdy, but it's kind of made me refocus on where I'm getting my information, what my worldview is through. Obviously, the perspective is, what does the Bible say? What is, I'm trusting Christ's in control, and then everything else. Not that it doesn't matter, but
Well, I think it's what helps you not go crazy.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's like we can talk and we can kind of guesstimate and be like, this is what I think, this is my opinion. And this is also recording this podcast 2 days after Trump got shot. So like this could be released a month from now, and we have significantly more data than what I just gave you. So everyone just keep in mind, this is very fresh, 2 days after it happened, and we're just still in the whatever. So I probably should release this podcast like tomorrow. So it's fresh. But you're right. And I think that, like I said from the beginning, having faith that God has it all under control, even with the assassination attempt yesterday, which, by the way, have you seen any of the CNN headlines?
No.
My brother. You're missing out.
I'm like, it's like intentional, just because CNN is just like BS, like whatever.
Andrew.
But it's also, I'm missing on some comedic gold. So
this is what they said. They said one of their first headlines after Trump got shot said, Trump falls after loud noises. Or Trump,
and that's just them trying to make it similar to Biden's health.
Yes,
that's
and they're just
only objective.
Trump ushered away after event.
Yeah,
Trush, dude got shot, and they're so, I don't know what word I can use here.
Yeah,
so Elon Musk shared a photo or whatever, and it was just like CNN be like. And it was like Caesar Augustus got killed by group hug. Yeah. Or something like that. It was so funny. He's like, anyway, so I thought that
is funny.
So anyway, it's just, so they wouldn't even admit that, okay, look at this. Caesar injured in group hug.
That's so funny.
That's CNN. But anyway, it was just, it's crazy. The whole thing is crazy.
I don't, like in the Trump thing, like, not to get you worked up, but I just don't know enough about it to have an opinion like one way or the other. Obviously, like looking at it from the surface level, Trump got shot, somebody died, so I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive for sure.
Yeah.
I saw somebody post this meme in a group chat I'm in. It's like, I'm tired of living through historic events. So many things just keep happening, and it's like you're kind of just used to it. It's like, Trump got shot. Let's make a meme about it,
Yes. Well, so you said it's the desensitized.
Yeah.
Where you've been desensitized from violence. Like, it doesn't... Dude, you could look up someone getting killed, and you could see a video of someone getting shot, and just...
Like the Ukraine-Russian war
was online.
Yeah.
He was being live streamed. Dude, I saw a soldier get blown up by a drone.
Yep.
And he just dropped to his knees and was praying before he just got absolutely just obliterated.
Yeah.
And I just went, next.
Yeah.
Like, that's messed up.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that we're sipping our coffee, eating a bagel, and being like, oh, yeah, what'd you watch this morning? Well, I watched this
Dimitri's dead.
Yeah. Right? It's completely, and so it's a desensitization of violence. And, we had a former president almost die yesterday by an inch. And people are like, this is funny. Let me. And dude, there were a bunch of people being like, this is when 4 inches matter, and like making trying to be like, I wish he did die. But anyway, so what? The Trump thing, you got me all.
That was like a JFK assassination.
It was a segue. That's what I was thinking because it's fresh in my mind. I did want to talk about it. I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna talk about the Trump thing today, just because it's fresh, And I think a lot of my listeners would love to know my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And you also didn't know a lot of it. So it was
not.
some fresh info for you.
It definitely would become, as far as motivation, not motivation, but like utilizing what happened as like a rallying cry for people that were maybe like borderline Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Not that like Trump was like, oh yeah, almost kill me and then I'll win the election. So,
Yeah.
But as far as capitalizing off of an event like that to use it for your benefit, which isn't wrong. Like
Yeah, well, that's what you should
politics is.
I mean, you almost got shot.
Yeah.
Like what? Like, and that's
fist pump.
Yeah,
you know.
dude. That was. I mean, and the thing is, dude. Like, I really just. I don't know. I mean, you can call me an idiot, but like, I just think Trump's just he's just that kind of dude. Like, he really is. You might hate me for that, but it is just one of those situations where, dude, when that picture is the iconic picture of the century, bro.
Yeah.
Like what? And that photographer is like, I'm gonna get paid.
Yeah. Puts his like watermark on it. So you have to buy it before you post it.
Oh man.
That's
so what other things, bro? Like we talked about the Titanic, the moon landing, JFK, Trump, Federal Reserve history. What other things? Just like these are some. If I would do a title of like conspiracy theories so crazy, they just might be true. Are there any that just like, bro, these will rock that I'm just not aware of? Because we've already talked about the ones I know. Besides that, I'm kind of clueless.
Yeah. So I guess with the moon landing, that's where I kind of got into like, okay, is NASA, like what's up with NASA?
Uh-oh. All right. Let's do it.
I mean, no, I'm not,
No, it's cool.
But a little bit of a history lesson. So Alan Dulles, who was the guy I was talking about, who was like the CIA guy, during World War II, he believed that we should have been more in favor of Hitler and against communism. So he was kind of like buddy with a lot of the Nazis in Switzerland, and because Switzerland was neutral. But then after the war, he was instrumental in getting them Operation Paperclip. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He was instrumental in getting Nazi scientists and generals and all of that protected during the trial. What do you call it? Nuremberg trial after World War II. He was instrumental in getting them either barely prosecuted or avoiding prosecution at all, and then moved over to the United States and then put into powerful
And this
position.
Alan dude was an American?
Alan Dulles was American, yeah. His brother, Dulles Airport's named after him. He was like the attorney general of Eisenhower or somebody. So powerful family, like, him and his brother. Alan Dulles was instrumental in getting Nazis moved over to the United States and then put into either military positions, or NASA was founded by a lot of former Nazis. Not necessarily like Nazis that were putting Jews into concentration camps, scientists that were working on stuff for Hitler and using their technology, which isn't, a dumb thing to do, but doesn't really look good,
right.
50 years later or whatever. So that's kind of the origins of NASA is Werner von Braun, who's like one of the main NASA guys, was also a Nazi. So you have the origins of NASA, which is a little bit sketchy. And then you have, from my perspective, fake moon landing. I don't believe we ever went. There's reports of them saying we've just now figured out how to make it through the Van Allen belt, which is that protective covering around the Earth, protecting us from solar flares or whatnot. So how are we able to get through that, 17 times or whatever during the Apollo missions if we're just now being able to figure that out? Then there's I don't know if you've seen the Challenger mission. I think it's Challenger or Columbia, where the space shuttle. Yeah, the one that blew up.
Challenger.
Yeah, Challenger. So that was like they had the teacher and then like the crew, and they all died. Have you looked into all of them have doppelgangers that are still alive?
No.
Yes.
Stop it.
Yes.
Stop it.
I wish I had a picture to show. Maybe you can add it.
If you send it to me, I'll put it up.
Yeah. So there's that's one of the main ones. Besides, like as far as NASA goes.
No. Okay. So what was it? So the Challenger, the people on the Challenger.
Yes.
They all have like twins. They were all twins.
Yeah. So as far as like NASA goes, for me, moon landing is like first red flag, and then this is the second one. So there's a very iconic, meme or post or whatever on Instagram or anywhere. You could Google it like easily. Challenger look-alike or whatever. And a lot of them have the same exact names. Like it's not even like they changed their names. So there's one who's like a professor in University of Michigan or something. There's like an Asian looking fellow who has a twin. There's a black gentleman that has a twin. There's another guy. I think it's the same name. He's just, you look at their faces and they're like the exact same person, just, 40 years older, 20 years older. I don't know if you're looking at it right now.
Yeah. Are the crew of the exploded Challengers still alive? And then it has these pictures of, holy.
I don't know these people. I've never met these people. I'm getting this information from a meme.
No, yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
So, I could be way off.
Well, obviously, yeah, I'm on Snopes, and they're obviously saying it's false, but I am looking at the picture. There's a picture where you can see, like, this. Have you seen that picture? Have you seen this picture?
Yeah, it's like the before and after.
Yeah, so it...
And you can look, like one of them is a professor at a college.
Yeah.
And like you can go to that college's website and she's a staff member and it's either the same last name or she's like a whatever astronomer, scientist, whatever you want to call it. Like that's what her.
Wow.
So like there's stuff like that with NASA as a whole. That's a little questionable.
So Project Bluebeam. What is Project Bluebeam? Remind me of our...
Project Bluebeam would be the faked alien invasion. So that would be anytime there's like a UFO sighting or anything like that, the conspiracy theorists would say that falls into Project Bluebeam. So my perspective would be the reason why, it's become more common to talk about aliens and stuff in media or like there's military hearings on UFO sightings and stuff like that. It's become a lot more normal. Again, desensitizing us to what I believe would be a future alien invasion.
What do you mean by alien invasion? Like legitimate, like a spiritual alien invasion, like the Antichrist and his minions, or is it like a
that's what
legitimate?
That's what I don't know about. Like from my own, again, I don't let this affect me as far as like anytime there's a UFO sighting, I'm just.
Well, so
like,
what
paranoid.
do you believe there's aliens? And,
I believe
define
in
aliens.
I believe in interdimensional extraterrestrial beings, not necessarily a little gray man from Mars.
Right.
If that makes sense. There could be, I don't know. The Bible doesn't talk about it, and that's like the cliche Christian answer.
Well, the Bible talks about angels, right?
And that would say alien falls into demon angel category.
Right, I would agree. So
Okay.
I think where you could argue, you look at Isaiah defining what a angel is, that is, flying around the throne of God, which is this like multi-winged, multi-eyed
Wheel of flame thing.
Creature.
Yeah.
That if someone ever saw one, like, holy crap, that's an alien.
Yeah.
And then also though, you have to keep in mind that Jesus talks about how angels are among you. Yeah. And you don't even know it.
Entertain them.
Entertainment, you don't know who it is. And so I do think that there has been sorry, you got me on a side thing, but this is
no, perfect.
There's been a desensitizedness of our world where it's like kooky to talk about the spiritual world.
Yeah.
Like, no, the physical world's all you have. Mm-hmm. Don't talk about the spiritual battle that's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
Don't talk about the spiritual world. You're weird if you do. And so I do think if your definition of alien is an extraterrestrial being that his home is not Earth, then by definition, technically an angel or a demon would be an alien.
Yeah.
By that definition. Yeah. And so I could see that line of thinking if that's what you meant. I don't know. I mean, if you try to say like Project Bluebeam, how does that line up with Revelation? I don't know about if it talks about any type of invasion of that kind of thing.
No, but like, so they're in the end times, whether that's like pre-trib, post-trib, rapture stuff, whatever. That's a whole separate podcast, but the Antichrist quickly rises into power, unites the world. So my thought would be, what could possibly happen? You look at the world right now, what could possibly be strong enough to unite everybody against something? So if you look at it that way, my thought process, or just it's not my idea, like I've heard other people talk about it, but what I kind of think about or agree with would be something huge would have to be there to, one, have someone like quickly rise to power that everybody would be on board with, and then two, have like military action as well. So that's why I'm thinking, you have all these Avengers movies and stuff, again, desensitizing us, my opinion, to like alien invasions, superheroes, superpowered people come and save us. The Bible talks about the Antichrist or that type of figure working signs and wonders. I think I could be butchering that. Sorry, Grammy. But
shout out Grandma.
Yeah. She's a big end times.
Okay.
She's a big like see you there in the air. Like
oh, really?
yeah,
Awesome.
love Grammy. She's the best.
Okay. Shout out Grammy. The best.
She's the best. But yeah, so like something like that.
Yeah.
My opinion. And
so the premise is, and this is this what Project Bluebeam is? This theory of alien invasion, or
it has to do with alien invasion, UFOs, and that they're either orchestrated by the government or the government knows about. It's kind of a broad.
So
it's like a catch-all
yeah.
that conspiracy theories would say that it falls under Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, just because like the Project Bluebeam is to desensitize people. Like
Yeah.
anytime you hear of an alien sighting or something like that, it's part of Project Bluebeam.
Yeah,
It's
to my
intentionally
understanding,
placed.
yes. Yeah, and that's why I like conspiracy theories, because like for some people they have, Marvel comic books, they have sports, whatever, but conspiracy theories is like my version of that, like entertaining myself, but there's also a little bit of like, okay, this could actually be true. Like there's stuff in here that we're not being told either the full story about or the truth at all.
Well, yeah, and I mean, especially when government's involved, and like they're not as clean as people think.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at like Project Orange, from the like Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we didn't know that this thing that we were going to
birth defects for
we had no idea this was going to affect our troops the way you did. It was a death sentence, and you knew it was.
Yeah.
So stop lying. And like, there's just so many cases of that.
Yeah.
That the more you look into things where the government says one thing, but the exact opposite happens or is true.
Yeah.
It does. Especially, I would say I am, as we talk and as I've looked into things. When people talk about the government and conspiracy theories, I'm like, sure.
My immediate reaction is like prove it wrong first,
I'm
and
like,
then
actually you're probably onto something.
Yeah.
You're probably closer to truth than what I was told.
9/11.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And with that, with that one,
Yeah.
9/11 was. I want to be careful with 9/11.
Yeah.
We can talk about it.
Yeah.
But I want to be careful because no matter what caused it, it was a very tragic thing.
For sure.
And so as long as people that are listening, as we talk like about the who and the what behind 9/11,
Yeah, 100%.
It's kind of like your point earlier. I think there needs to be a freedom to talk about topics and give opinions without being like, I'm just discounting this as not a big deal.
Yeah, like people died. Like my dad was in DC when the Pentagon got hit. He was there he was a Christian school administrator as well as your dad, I think you said it was. Yeah, so he was there for some conference, and he was going to actually meet Bush or somebody there. And then like everything went crazy. Like he saw the smoke from the Pentagon. Like people died. It wasn't like it didn't happen. The conspiracy theory that I fall in line with is they planned it and that it was orchestrated to justify the Middle East, all that stuff for the next 20 years.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and this is where, from what I've looked into the 9/11 stuff, and so 9/11 happened. So the theory is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of money in the Middle East with oil.
Yeah.
With like, and we wanted control of said oil. But we couldn't just outright go to war.
Yeah.
And just
because then we're painted as tyrants and
correct.
dictators. Yeah.
So the theory is that we needed to create an enemy. And if that meant in order for us to get, our troops and stuff in these countries.
Yeah.
And if that meant losing 20,000 lives, that means, or 10,000 or however many passed away.
2,997.
There you go. Then so be it. That's a small cost for, again, not what I'm saying. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
For the greater good. So then they created an enemy. They caused it. They did it. And then obviously Bush comes out and says, we're at war on terror, and the rest is history with the Middle East. Right? That's kind of
that's like the overview.
Okay, so my question is this: when I have heard that theory, the thing that never really quite made sense to me is like, what did we get out of that whole thing that was so worth it to us? Because we're not in there anymore.
Yep.
And we sent troops there that needlessly died. But like we're not what gain was that in any capacity for us to do that? Because it's one of those conspiracy theories that to me on surface level, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
But as I'm like, well, I don't even understand what the main goal was because we're not even there.
Yeah, and I don't know like the economics behind it. Definitely financial, like oil. Back to the military.
Did we get cheaper oil as a result?
I mean, the government. Also, our dollar at that time was based off of oil. Before it was like a gold standard dollar, and that kind of gets into Saudi Arabia, that kind of stuff. But so there's definitely a financial benefit, not necessarily us as citizens filling up at the pump, but government, and then also the military-industrial complex. If you look at the history of the United States, we've been at war for like 90-something% of our history. And there's a very obvious trend of when we're at war, our economy tends to have a bounce back. Like we do better. After the war, there's a little bit of a recession. So like there's that thought process behind it too. There's the control. So during war, a lot of times political people stay in power because we're in a uncertain time. But as far as the 9/11, if you look at, so there's the neocons, which is like George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld or something. They were all in politics during Nixon, Reagan, all that stuff. And in the 90s, they had a manifesto that they wrote, and they talk about how they need a new Pearl Harbor event for them to seize power as a political faction of the Republican Party.
And then Bush Sr.?
Bush Sr., okay. Yeah. And he was actually, again, earlier I was saying like every conspiracy theory is kind of tied together, heavily involved with the JFK stuff, George H.W. But that's like a whole...
On like the CIA side?
Because he was, I don't know if he was the head of the CIA, not at that time, but he became the head of the CIA. Mm-hmm. He was in charge of a CIA hit squad, which was filled with Cubans. He was actually in Dallas when JFK got assassinated. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so neocons were looking for a way to pretty much seize power of the United States government, either for the foreseeable future or at least for a decent chunk of time. And in their manifesto, it pretty much talks about how they need a new Pearl Harbor event to happen, and then that will be the catalyst for them to seize power. And that's what I was talking about earlier with Al Gore, Bush, that election. That election pretty much boiled down to Florida, and Jeb Bush, I think, was the governor of Florida at that time. And ultimately, he made the decision of if Florida went Bush's way or Al Gore's way. So getting George Bush into office is even a little bit of a conspiracy. Once in office, Dick Cheney had a lot of control over military and stuff like that, and he's one of those neocons, new conservatives. But yeah, so they, as far as 9/11 goes, the actual time, they had all of these, military was doing these like practices or whatever you call them, flight exercises of a hijacking happening in the DC, Boston, New York area. So during September 11th, they had all of these like hijacking simulations going on throughout the East Coast, which Dick Cheney was orchestrating that. If you look into the Pentagon, the Rumsfeld had just announced to Congress or whomever that they had misplaced like trillions of dollars. They didn't know where it went, the military spending stuff. And when the Pentagon got hit, they hit the part of the Pentagon that keeps track of all the records as far as spending and all that. And that area was under construction, so there wasn't really anybody.
Didn't they also just like lose like? They said they just misplaced millions of dollars on that day or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, from whatever event before that, they had misplaced all this money, and then 2 days later,
because before the event, they said they had misplaced money.
It was literally, I think it was September 9th. Rumsfeld's like, hey, we lost $1.something trillion. We don't know where it is. And then 2 days later, Pentagon gets hit. Obviously, everything else, horrible, but orchestrating it, motivation.
The section of the Pentagon that got hit was where they keep track of everything?
The records of like spending, government spending. Another thing about 9/11, and this is kind of like, I'm kind of cherry picking different things, but the person that owned the Twin Towers. I'm reading the Two Towers to my kids. That's what, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Shout out Tolkien.
Yeah. So the person that owned the Twin Towers had recently either purchased it or increased his insurance policy on the buildings. When the attacks happened, like all of his kids had offices in the buildings, and none of them were in their offices during the time. So there's stuff like that like doesn't really add up. They knew who did it like immediately. Like they were like, oh yeah, it was what's his face? Not Saddam Hussein. Osama bin Laden orchestrated it. Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset in the 80s and worked directly with the Bush family. So there's all of these like overlapping aspects to 9/11 to where I might not be able to answer your question what the exact motivation was, but there's enough questions around it to where, I tend to not believe the government narrative on that.
Why do you think it's so like not kosher to have the conversation we just had? Because I think a lot of times people be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, even, on the phone, I was like, hey, I want to be careful about certain things. Why
Which you can cut this out.
No. I mean, it's fine. Yeah. I think, like I said, people might disagree, but I wonder, like, why do you, because people talk a lot about misinformation.
Yeah.
And the dangers of misinformation.
Yeah.
And, label conspiracy theorists as like they're just spreading misinformation. And I think legitimately sometimes people can, like sometimes a lie sounds better than the truth, and sometimes the truth is boring. So I think sometimes conspiracy theories they're fun, they're mystical, they're exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
They're the if you're like
I know information that no one else knows.
Yeah, like it's just like I've cracked the code, and actually it's like no, it's just a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
That's actually what happened. Do you find that there's a line that people need to be careful of? Do you think it's actually healthy to just have free thinking people? Or do you think that there could be like unintentional damage as a result?
Yeah, there could definitely be damage. Like you go into Alex Jones and the Sandy Hook shooting and all that. Like obviously people were killed during that time and families lost kids. And, that's not a subject to just cavalierly talk about, without thinking, being sensitive about it. The reason why I think 9/11 kind of has this stigma of like not talking about it is once you get into the government potentially allowed, at the least, or orchestrated the destruction of two iconic buildings which had tons of people in it.
It sounds crazy.
Yeah, like you at that point lose all faith in the United States government. If they don't have faith in the people, then they lose their power over,
Yeah, because you're like, if this is true, holy crap.
Yeah, and it's not just 9/11. But it's the war after, and
then it's just a domino effect.
Yeah.
If you believe this to be true, then I mean your whole worldview is shattered.
Yeah, if your worldview is built on the
government, being a ally to you.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, like I try to like categorize it in my mind as I believe that 9/11 was an inside job and all that. But I think before that, I had already made up my mind that I'm not going to trust pretty much anything the government says. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but I mean, it's just enough things have come my way. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or
whatever that is.
Yeah, that
shame on you.
Yeah,
which wait, fool me.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's kind of the 9/11 from a 1,000-foot view, and there's other stuff like Building 7 collapsed. I don't know if you've looked into Building 7 at all. It's World Trade Center's Building 7 collapsed even though it wasn't hit by a plane. They said that a fire started from debris that fell over from the other buildings, and then Building 7 fell somehow. Building 6 was burnt to the ground.
Well, I also know that there's video of like it almost looked like the two towers were blown up from the inside.
Yeah.
Because like just having a plane hit shouldn't take it down.
Yeah.
It was built in a way to be able to.
It's the first skyscraper building to collapse from a fire.
And you can see it almost like shockwave, the whole building shockwave.
Yeah.
And then it collapsed straight down in a heap. It doesn't tumble or it doesn't do anything
it doesn't,
else. Almost like the foundations were
a controlled demolition.
Yeah. And so I don't know if that's legitimate, but I have heard that before as well.
And that's where the kind of debate online or like forums, especially when it first happened. There are all these engineer investigations looking into the structure of the building, and then the argument became, okay, jet fuel was the source of the fire. The conspiracy theory side would say jet fuel can't burn hot enough to melt
metal.
Yeah, melt metal. And then they would say, well, it didn't melt the metal, it just weakened it enough to where it crumbled and twisted and fell. But there's a lot of firsthand accounts talking about molten metal like flowing under the debris and stuff like that. So something was melting the metal that was there. And the week before, there was a whole bunch of asbestos in those buildings because at the time of construction, asbestos was a common building material. And they were doing like these renovations and stuff, and the owner of the building pretty much was like, we're not going to remove it, we're just going to keep it there.
Okay.
But what I was saying earlier was the building was shut down a couple days before or a week before, and they were doing these renovations at night while no one was in the building. So the thought would be, okay, how could they rig explosives to destroy the whole building? It's like, well, that would be the opportunity for them to have placed those.
And I think one thing you have to be careful of too is like, at the same time, dude, like terrorists are bad people. There are people out there that are bad people. Yeah. And so I think that you know, when it's always spin back to the American government, maybe that is legitimate too. I also still tend to think that I'm like, well, I don't think, you know, Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden were the most stand-up guys either.
100%.
And they're terrible in their own rank. And so it doesn't shock me that they could pull something off like this. And so these are good to talk about. And I think that, again, as people listen to this, I just want people to understand, like, this is the point of the show, is to have real and authentic conversations. Now, whether you agree or not, that's fine. But thinking critically through things, you could be like, well, hey, maybe... But again, like we said 1,000 times, God's in control. It shouldn't scare anybody. It's one of the situations where it's like, hey, if this happened, you know what? God is just as much in control if Bush caused 9/11 than Osama bin Laden did.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, you know, we know who wins the battle.
Yeah.
And so that shouldn't really change our, like, I don't want people listening to be like, holy crap, I'm not sleeping for 8 years.
That's not a healthy way to live.
No.
If that type of stuff you can't think about without making your world crumble, then maybe conspiracy theories aren't for you.
Maybe table this.
Maybe
this
change the channel.
Yeah. But actually let the video play through so I get retention.
Yes. What we had said earlier is still true in this regard. Like, people died, you know, families were ruined, people's businesses were ruined from being in that area. Like, talking about it is not in a way to downplay the seriousness of the lives that were lost. It's more so in the scope of conspiracy theories, looking at facts.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just like, I think when we say the word conspiracy theories, what you mean is there's a group of people that are just trying to get to the bottom of it and that doesn't trust the surface level explanation given.
Yeah.
Is pretty much what really the premise of when you say conspiracy theory, that's really what you're trying to do.
And it's, even when I say conspiracy theory, every time I say it, it's like, I know I'm saying a phrase that the government installed for JFK,
and people will have a reaction to when they hear, because a lot of times when people hear conspiracy theories, they just automatically assume it to be false and crazy.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm trying to be like, some of it could be, or some of it could be legit.
Yeah.
But that's the point.
And that's the power of words.
And so anyway, I just think that the more we can talk, and I encourage our listeners to talk to people that you disagree, that doesn't mean, though, that you can't put your line in the sand of what you believe.
For sure. And that's been on my like journey of conspiracy theories. It's made me have to sit down and think about things, why I believe certain things, what that line is for me in the sand, instead of just blindly, oh, they said to do this, okay, I'm going to go do this.
Yeah.
Like, the mindless, unintentional decision making is what has led our country to the position that it's in right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not a political whatever, you know, I don't have
political
a degree.
Junkie.
Yeah, I don't know anything. I'm not whatever, but just from my perspective, you know, that's when people are faced with hard decisions or any decision and you just blindly go with what you're being told to do. That's when, you know, you lose rights, you lose whatever it is. So, that's probably blowing up the importance of conspiracy theories a little too much, but that has helped me get into the mindset of kind of critiquing looking at things, taking information in as with a grain of salt. Like there's probably a little bit of truth in this. What is it? Is the rest of it just BS? Is there more, more than a teaspoon?
Well, I think also just taking it for what it is. It's like, you know what? At the end of the day, doesn't change my standing with Christ in eternity. And this is just an opportunity. Like you said, like half of it's entertainment for you.
Yeah.
But the other half is legitimate. And I've heard a phrase where basically like the more angry people get, the closer you probably are to the truth. And so sometimes when it comes to these types of things where people get really angry or they're trying to shut you down or you don't talk about this, you don't talk about JFK. It was this guy.
And you're crazy.
You're crazy. Yeah. And when the name calling starts, you can almost be rest assured there's something there that maybe, or it's just they don't want, maybe it is true, but it is worth at least considering.
Yeah, the truth doesn't need to be defended. I'll keep saying that.
That's a good one. That's a shirt that needs to be made. Well, dude, I think this was fun. I feel like we could talk till 6 hours. Now. But I appreciate you coming on the show. I think this was as the best episode we could possibly have made. Like I loved it.
Cool.
I hope you had fun.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I hope you had a fun time.
Most of the time when I start this conversation, people's eyes kind of glaze over. They're just like, I don't want to go into this for the next 30 minutes. So it was nice to kind of have a back and forth, but also me kind of sharing some stuff too.
Yeah, it was great. And I'm telling you, I really hope people got your heart where it was just like, look, this is what I like doing. It's a fun hobby, but it's also, I think there's some truth to there.
Yeah.
And as we encourage all the listeners, I said this 1,000 times, is have conversations, think for yourself.
Yep.
And
do your own research.
Yeah, and have some fun. I really hope that people that watch this, I hope you had fun with this episode. This was a different style. A couple things I want to throw out to the listeners. If you enjoyed this style, if you enjoyed the conspiracy theories, kind of maybe a little bit more of the, should we talk about this side? I've considered to do a members only podcast where we talk about more of these types of things that maybe certain people won't like and would demonetize me if we said. So if you like this type of content and you want the show to continue to have people on like Andrew and talk about things that aren't accepted by YouTube's algorithmic standard, but you would like to see like additional clips and things that maybe we talk about off the camera, let us know in the comments if you would be wanting me to start something like that. I think maybe like a virtual podcast could be a fun thing. Cool. Have you like a reoccurring guest?
Yeah,
on?
I'd love it.
So let us know if you enjoyed this episode. Please, do you have any social media or anything yet?
Facebook
group, anything?
Nothing right now. Pretty much relying on word of mouth. But if you're in the Greenville area, Netz Electric. Also, Indigo Plumbing is another good company if you need any plumbing needs. But that's my only shout outs.
Well, we'll make sure Andrew gets a Facebook made.
Yeah, I got it.
By the time I drop the podcast, I'll make sure you get a company Facebook made.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so you're like, I'm not going to do that.
I mean, I'm staying pretty busy without it. Obviously, long term, yeah.
Well, anyway, so if you're in the Greenville area, support Andrew. Thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Like, comment, share this with a friend, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Peace.
Thanks, brother.
Yes, sir.
See you guys. Nice, bro.
Ooh, I got a piece of
Go.
The last one.